Hello crafters, welcome back to my channel. I've been busy behind the scenes crafting up a storm lately, and today I've got part 1 of a fun collab with Altenew to share with you. Altenew reached out to me and allowed me to pick out some product to play around with, and this is my haul. I chose the Versatile Greetings die set. I've seen a lot of good things about this die set, and I'm really happy to be playing with it today. I know it's Jennifer McGuire's favorites lately, so I'm excited to have that. And I love that you get the word die and the shadow. I picked up the Sentiment Strips 2 stamp set. I love the variety of sentiments in this stamp set. I think it's great. It's literally for any occasion, and they have a couple more of these too, and I've got my eye on those next. And they also have sentiment dies that work with this set, as well as some other stamp sets of theirs, so I snagged that as well. I chose a alcohol ink background pattern paper pack. I enjoy alcohol ink creating them, but I feel like sometimes mine just aren't pretty, so I like that this takes the work out of it for you and you're guaranteed to have a beautiful background. I've also had my eye on this die set, the Pleasant Pansy 3D die set. It's a fabulous layering die, and honestly, pansies I think are one of my favorite flowers, but I say that about every flower. But I'm just very happy to have this and be playing around with it today. And it's a fabulous layering die, super easy to create with. And then last but certainly not least, I have the Craft a Flower Sulfur Cosmo layering die. This is my first time using their Craft a Flower die sets, and I love them. They're really easy to make, really easy to layer up with how they create the little keyhole design and the little arrow design that allows you to line your die cuts up seamlessly. But that will be in my next video, so stay tuned for that. And these are some of the alcohol ink pattern papers. The cool thing, it kind of confused me at first, but patterns aren't printed on the same papers front and back each time, which is kind of nice because then you don't have to worry about, like, if you like both sides of one paper, of only being able to use one side or having to really be cautious with your die cutting or however you plan to use the papers. Today I am planning to use this with the Pleasant Pansy die set. It seems really fun to do. So I'm just kind of flipping through the papers here, looking at what I've got. And I did pull out the more purple ones to play with because I really wanted some purple pansies today. I eventually do settle on the one on my desk because it's a little bit brighter than the deep purple one, which is gorgeous, but I think a little too dark. So I pulled some cardstock that plays really well with this alcohol ink background, just so that I can work on the other layered sections. So I pulled out Eggplant, Fig, and Lilac from Concord and Ninth. It pairs very well with this background. Like, the colors are very much there. You can see them. But yeah, now you can kind of see how that other purple background is a little bit dark, but it's very, very pretty. So I am die cutting out the furthest back petal out of Eggplant, the next petal out of Fig, the kind of, I guess, face of the flower out of Lilac, and then the little detailed portion out of the alcohol ink background. And it's really fun because you can pick any part of this background to, make your flower. It really helps you to make each flower unique. Like, no flower is gonna look the same, and that's pretty fun. I like the variety that adds. So I'm gonna run that through my Big Shot, which I've really been enjoying using again lately. I do have a magnetic not plate, but the little a magnetic platform for it, but I find the Big Shot is a lot easier to crank than my Platinum 6s at times, so I'm enjoying using that again. And so I'm removing all of my die cut pieces here just to get a look on how this is gonna look, to make sure that I like what I'm doing and it's turning out well. And spoiler alert, I do. I love how this is looking. Now I've decided to die cut the little detail pieces out of some eggplant cardstock to really pop in the middle of that flower, and cut the little flower center out of Buttercup. It seemed like the right tone of yellow to use, like the right amount of contrast to it. So I chose that over, I think I was leaning towards Stardust or maybe Sunflower. And I'm just getting a feel for how this looks, making sure that I really like it before I commit to gluing it down and die cutting some more. I'm a visual crafter in that sense. Like, I don't know, I really have to see things before committing to them. But I don't know, maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm not. If you do the same thing, let me know. And so I really like how this looks. My only thing is the fig petal kind of gets lost there. Like it kind of blends in to the little alcohol ink portion that I cut. So I cut a flower again, but this time I cut that second petal in out of eggplant, and I really like how that looks as well. And I like the variety between these two flowers with that fig versus eggplant petal. So I did decide to cut two more, one more of fig being the second petal, one more of eggplant being that second petal. So that way there's a little bit of visual interest and a little bit where things aren't too similar. So I'm layering that up with some liquid glue. And these are super easy to put together. The bottom edge of the flower is what you really want to line your stuff up with, your die cuts up with. And it honestly, it's seamless. I love this die set. It makes me really happy. And I can't wait to create more with it. So I'm sticking those guys down little by little. And I've got that layered petal on top. I guess the little tiny lilac one. I'm going to stick down that little alcohol ink piece. And I've got that in place. You could definitely build this up with foam if you really wanted to for like thick dimension, but I do like the wiggle time that glue allows you to have here. And then for these little detail pieces on the top, it's really cool because they actually have the little, that edge there that I'm pointing to. It's contoured to that front facing petal there. That guy, the contours are on each side, so you can line those little detail pieces up perfectly. I mean, you can also stick them wherever you want because this is your flower and you can make it however your heart desires. But I do like that the thought is really taken out of assembly here. It's a very therapeutic die set to create with. You could just die cut a bunch of these and sit and make them. And there we go. That's the first completed flower. So I'm going to get the rest of these guys glued down. And here's that eggplant one. I really love how it looks. I love that pop, the dark pop to that petal. And now we're going to get the other ones built. And see, you can see that the alcohol ink panel is different on each one, and I love it. And I am planning to make these diagonal with my layout, so that way it's not the same top and bottom when you look at it. Like the fig ones, it's not a row of fig and not a row of eggplant. I like that little bit of variety there. So at this point, my plan was to emboss the "I appreciate your kindness" sentiment and die cut it with that sentiment die and pop that in my thanks greeting on the bottom of the card. It's not a bad layout, like it works pretty well. I wasn't sold on it. I thought things were lacking, so I decided it would be time to add some leaves to this just for a little bit more visual interest. And so here I am deciding which greens to use. You can tell the sprout and parsley, they're the nice vibrant colors. And here, lemongrass, artichoke, and avocado, they're a little too muted. The true greens definitely look a little bit better or pop a little bit more with these flowers. So I decided on those. And then at first I wasn't sure how I wanted these layered, so I die cut one of each, where the one you see me building here, it has the sprout as the large portion of the leaf and then the detail piece for parsley as parsley. And then the small leaf, I reversed it. And I ended up deciding on having the outer leaf portion die cut out of sprout and the little detailed portion out of parsley. I really liked how that looked. And then there's a little detail piece that allows you to add a vein to your leaf. And I ended up settling on artichoke or avocado here because I think it looked better than if I used a true green of evergreen, which it's in the same, color family as parsley and sprout. They go together well because they're that true green. But I think the avocado here really it just added something to it. I don't know what. It just had a little something, a little je ne sais quoi, as they say. But I really liked it. I like how it turned out. I think avocado was the way to go. So now I've decided to die cut the Thanks die out of some black glossy cardstock from Simon Says Stamp and the shadow out of some Concord & Ninth white cardstock, just so that's a little bit of a sturdier cardstock. And then at this point, I decided it was time to heat emboss my sentiment. So I pulled out some black cardstock from Concord & Ninth and I lined up my little sentiment there using my Grip Matte Transparency. I picked that up with my Misty. And then I'm priming the stamp here since it's brand new and prepping my paper with some anti-static powder and inking it up with Versamark. I'm really smushing that ink pad on the stamp there, but my ink pad is drying up, so you don't have to be as crazy as I was. And at this point, I thought I had a pretty good impression. I was a little iffy, or pretty good stamp. I was a little bit iffy on the eye, but I decided to chance it. So I'm powdering that up with some alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. And then once I've got that covered and coated, I'm going to heat set it. And then now you can see that eye, I definitely missed the mark a little bit. So I'm pulling out my Uniball white gel pen and I'm just going to touch that up. Just make the eye look a bit more complete. Not too shabby. I'm happy with how it turned out. And I'm lining up the die here to cut that sentiment out. And I am hanging it off because I'm going to do a little bit of partial, I guess you would call it partial die cutting, to shorten the sentiment strip to the length that I wanted it to be. So I ran that through my Bitty Buzz cutter. And then now I'm going to line that die up again, trying to space it as evenly as I can so that it looks the same as the opposite side. And I'm going to tape that and just run that through. And I always make sure that the sentiment strip is lined up within that die, so I don't accidentally trim part of the sentiment strip when I die cut it. So I'm again fussing with my arrangement here. And then at this point, I was thinking things need to change a little bit. It doesn't look bad. You could definitely just use that sentiment strip on the bottom of the card, maybe move it up a little bit so that it's a little bit off from the bottom and move your flowers around, and that would be a perfectly fine card. But I decided to put the sentiment in the middle of the card. And this isn't something that I don't usually create this way. I don't know if I've built a card around a sentiment quite like this before, but I was liking how it was turning out, and so I decided to go with it. After tweaking flowers way too much. And so again, I'm bringing in those leaves because really they add something to this. It really makes it feel finished, like you could definitely leave it with the flowers as is, but the leaves just add something magical to this card. And some extra color, which never hurts. So I'm really figuring out how I want those leaves. And then off camera, I decided to redo my sentiment out of some matte gold cardstock. And at this point, I was thinking about adding some sequins or dewdrops, but I wasn't really liking how that would look. I feel like it wouldn't give me enough of a pop. So I ended up going for some splatter or spatter. I don't know which way is the correct way to call it, but I tend to call it splatter. So bear with me. I'm sorry if it if it drives you crazy. So I'm pulling everything off of my card base and I'm bringing out my little box here. I tend to do some alcohol inking in this box. So I figured why not splatter in it, since the last time I did this, I didn't use a box and I had it everywhere. But spoiler alert, I still do this time. So I have my brush a little bit wet and I'm putting some black ink onto that acrylic block and giving it one little squirt of water from my Tim Holtz water bottle. And I'm just going to pick up that black ink, just really get it moving on the brush, and then I'm just going to tap it off the block. I've seen people flick off the block. I do a little bit of that too. I'm going to tap it off the block, flick it from the block, just really trying to get some larger splatter on there, some larger dots. But I wasn't quite achieving that. And at this point, I felt like I was starting to overwork it a little bit. It looked a little too... I had the chance to really ruin this background, I guess. So I called it quits before it got too crazy. So I cleaned off my block and my brush before that ink set as well. And I'm pulling out my grip mat here just to make things a little bit easier to assemble this. And I'm going to stick it down on my glass board here. So I'm going to pop that down. And this really does make assembling your cards a breeze because everything stays in place. And I'm going to give it a quick clean just to make sure the stick is really good because I haven't cleaned it in a little bit. So once that dries, I'm going to pop my card panel on there. Sorry for my head getting in the way with all my little crazy hairs. It's a bit hot in Washington this week. So I'm going to line those flowers back up, trying to get them positioned exactly how I like them. And I do like how the leaves are arranged here because every flower looks a little bit different. On the top row, you've got your leaves on the left, and then you also have the second flower there. It has the smaller, the smaller of the leaves pointing down. And then on the bottom row, I end up switching out that leaf there for a larger leaf. But that one's pointing down, and then the other ones are pointing to the right. So I like the variety that you get here. Like, nothing truly feels the same. So I'm lining that greeting back up just to make sure that my flowers are spaced how I like. And since they are, I'm going to pull them off and pull out some press and seal. I'm going to rip a piece that is big enough here to pick everything up and allow me to burnish it onto my glass surface. I learned that from Dawn at W+9, and it's a really helpful trick because it allows you to create a hinge when you do this. And that for me can be my biggest struggle when using press and seal if I don't have that hinge. Because it's like, okay, I've got it lined up, but am I going to get it lined up again how I want it on the card base? So I'm burnishing everything to get it to stick to the press and seal. And I'm going to lift that little hinge back. And I'm going to apply some glue on the back of the leaves. And since these leaves are the furthest back, I decided on glue for them just so that adds a little bit more dimension to the panel as well. So I'm going to flip that press and seal back over, push on those leaves to get them to stick down, and then I'm going to pull that piece of press and seal back over. So everything is how I like it. And I'm going to add some thin foam squares onto the back of the flowers here, just so that adds a bit more dimension on top of the leaves. So we're really building it up here. And then I'm going to put some glue on the back so that it gives me a little bit of wiggle room once I put this down, just in case things are somehow misaligned. So I'm going to flip that over and I'm going to press down and then gently peel the press and seal off. And if you see here, there's a little bit of cardstock that actually got stuck to it today. I haven't had that happen before, but it's actually not that noticeable on the fig cardstock. And if it is, it adds a little bit of visual interest, I guess. So I'm not upset about it today. And then I'm going to take some thick foam squares and I'm going to pop those on the back of the thanks, just so that that really sticks out above the flowers. Maybe it'll give it a little bit more of a visual impact. So I'm going to get those popped down, over adhesing, classically as I do. And then before sticking that down, I did decide to strengthen my sentiment strip by putting a strip of black cardstock on the back of it and gluing that down. I feel like that makes things a little bit stronger when I put foam on it, which I did here. I ended up using thin foam squares, I believe. Yes, I used thin foam squares on that sentiment strip. So there's a little bit of difference between the sentiment, the thanks, and the little sentiment strip. So I'm popping off those adhesive backers and I'm going to put some glue on the foam. And then I'm going to do my very best to stick this down straight. Unfortunately, with how things are, I can't really use my ruler to make sure things are straight, so I'm eyeballing it, and while eyeballing both the sentiment and the sentiment strip, I still think it's never straight, so there's going to be a bit of wiggling around here. It's like that's the thing that drives me crazy is when you think it's straight, and then you look at it a little different, and then you're like, oh, is that really straight? So I'm doing quite a bit of that here. But once I've got it to how I like it, it turns out all right. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. It's a handmade card. It doesn't have to be. And so here we go. This is what the completed card looks like. And then after I stopped filming, I did put it on a card base because I forgot to do that in the video. But I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think it's beautiful. The sentiment is perfect here. I love that alcohol ink cardstock in these pansies. They're so beautiful that I just want to make a bunch more cards like this. I think it's super fun. You could do it in a whole rainbow and gift a set of cards to somebody if you wanted, which I might just do. The holidays are coming. But yeah, so that is today's finished card. Be on the lookout for part 2 using that Craft a Flower die set. And I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by today and watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to catch you next time.